The past year here at the University of Washington, and every other college in the country, has been unlike any other we've seen in our lifetimes. Along the way, we've had many hardships and difficulties, but we've also learned a lot. We have the chance to pass down these experiences and therefore this knowledge to the next generation for their posterity. In the event of another pandemic or any kind of disaster requiring the evacuation of a college campus, or another large organization that depends on in-person attendance for any reason. These future incidents can be much better mitigated with knowledge of not only our resilience, but also of the mistakes we made. My name is Matthew Bauman, and my senior project is entitled Hindsight 2020. Pandemics are a rare but repeated feature of our densely populated, connected world. The last pandemic comparable to this one in America was the 1918 Spanish flu, which is nearly exactly a century behind us, with any information shouted across time difficult to collect and use. Although this information will still be a product of its time, as anything from 1918 as of its time, I hope to make this easily referable as a source of our stories to anyone with need of them. For this project, I'm producing a special edition news magazine chronicling the first year of the pandemic, roughly the year 2020. Through scholarly articles, a timeline and numerical analysis, and interviews with students and faculty members, I hope to tell the story of our year in a way that informs future readers and provides us a way to look back on how we've prevailed. The magazine consists of 3 academic articles as described in the research section of the video. I chose the effects of everyone in school, the effects of the COVID-19 virus directly, and the economic effects resulting from the pandemic as my 3 areas of focus. Sources such as the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed, along with student and local newspapers, were invaluable as I wrote these articles. I attempted to find all sides of the story by cross-referencing events and rounding out different sides to each story. I compiled a list of dates of important events, both local to the University of Washington and worldwide during the pandemic, from patient zero in 2019 to limited reopening at the start of 2021. Alongside, I checked the case numbers at Washington's universities periodically and looked for the explanations behind spikes, such as the UW Greek Row outbreaks during summer of 2020. The most fascinating part of this project was interviewing students and faculty. I developed lines of questioning for students and professors, mainly about the challenging aspects of the pandemic, their opinions about participation and cameras, their opinions on COVID-19 safety versus learning enrichment, and possible ways to have both. I've selected a few quotes from the interviews I completed during this project that exemplify the opinions and moods I've had the opportunity to hear. Amanda, a junior in animal science at Washington State University, says, "We need honest risk assessment for healthy or mostly healthy people, and hybrid options for people who are sick or living with someone sick. The reward of going outside outweighs the risk for those who are healthy. The whole experience of being in a purpose-built learning environment and going to the library for better concentration is particularly important to me. A one-size-fits-all approach to the pandemic is sure not to fit anyone." Unica, a fellow CEP student from the University of Washington, says, "Being online has given me much more time to work on my passion projects, as well as my CEP senior project. If I were to go in person, I would have nowhere near as much time or effort to put into my projects. It's not easy taking 3 buses every day, getting food on the Ave every day. I excel the most by managing my own time at home, and I've learned much more about web design, scheduling online meetings, and other productivity tools during the pandemic." Therefore, responses from varying students in different departments diverge wildly. Sadly, there is no one thing that we can all do to benefit everyone. Michael Brown, a University of Washington professor of geography, reports, "The greatest challenge is the lack of instant feedback when you're running a course. The vast majority of students don't turn their cameras on. I can't see who I'm talking to, and I can't see their reactions to what I'm saying and not saying. And many fewer people participate over Zoom as well." Although he also asks for a reciprocal sharing of compassion between students and professors alike, as all learn the new format of schooling. Whether or not we've experienced layoffs, relocations, or even the COVID-19 illness itself, remote learning has affected everyone in the education industry. Students now take every class from their own apartments or dorm rooms or their families' homes. Although this sounds like a serviceable idea on the surface, it raises concerns over tuition remaining the same for a decidedly less enriching experience, how to balance compassion for students with enforcement of rules and exam proctoring, and how educators themselves can best prepare for a career-wide change in practices. Students are concerned over the surveillance implied in classes that mandate webcams turned on, and by test proctoring software, which takes voice samples, requires a full scan of the room the student uses during the exam, and often makes mistakes, false flagging people whose families talk audibly in the background, or failing to recognize students with darker skin tones. Professors have often found good takeaways from the pandemic, indulging in compassion towards their students and switching their exams from memorization and pass-fail grading to analysis and essay writing, which are easier to proctor and lead to students achieving more understanding of the material. As for the campuses themselves, you can see that the University of Washington's famed cherry trees are seeing less visitors than usual, and the line for the local Starbucks truck is 6 foot social distanced. The local economies around our universities have undeniably suffered as students move out of dense areas to quarantine or remain in their rooms more often. Government mandates can cripple smaller businesses whose spaces are not large enough to reopen at limited capacity, and delivery services can become strained, exacerbating an important labor disagreement with concerns for workers' safety and rights. The lack of students showing up in person have rendered bare the great social and culinary scenes that have developed around campuses. This double blow of regulations impacting small spaces and the scattering of clientele has devastated the Seattle restaurant scene. The much-beloved Orange King restaurant in the U District is a heartbreaking loss for its many nostalgic patrons. Universities themselves, already forced to depend less and less on the state, and more on their enrollment numbers and revenue per student, are also feeling the strain of fewer and fewer students. Even if they collect the same in tuition, housing and other campus service fees revenue has plummeted, and lucrative sports seasons have been tricky to maintain. Although the risk of fatal COVID-19 infection is very low for most traditionally aged students, we must not understate it. Some of those who have contracted and later tested negative for the virus have lingering side effects severe enough to cause formerly effective students to drop out of school. These casualties of the pandemic must be remembered and helped to heal, and hopefully be returned to school at some point in life. Among the most terrifying of those symptoms are a lingering case of dullness or brain fog, permanent respiratory damage, long-lasting fatigue, and the loss of taste and smell. These symptoms await further study for their prospects of long-term recovery, but currently look quite dire. On-campus health services have also had to change course for their care for all patients, both COVID-19 and pre-existing. Since it is easy to criticize or praise a single university for its response to COVID-19, I am also looking towards 4-year public universities elsewhere in Washington state. Through a large, detailed timeline, analysis of each school's COVID-19 dashboards, and the tracking of current events in the local news, I will establish a more objective view of the school's efforts, successes, and stumbles. Here you can see the COVID-19 dashboards presented by the University of Washington, Washington State University, and Western Washington University. Although I learned many things about university finance and corporation-style motives, test proctoring software and remote learning difficulties, the balance of surveillance and medical information transfer, and the heartbreaking losses of students who've directly suffered from the COVID-19 illness, the enduring theme is this: compassion is key. The COVID-19 pandemic has uncovered the best and worst of us, from society-wide reckonings over racial and economic injustices and inequities, to how we've treated the rest of the people in our own lives. I have certainly benefited from the compassion shown to me by those around me, and I hope my every action can pass that along to someone else in need. Although our experiences are many and varied, I believe that we are all in the midst of a defining event for our generation, and the way we act now will determine whether we look back on this moment as a personal success or a personal failure. I personally want to look back and see that I did what I could, both to care for those close to me and inspire those who came after me. For the expansion of this project, I would complete more interviews, consider data from a broader range and number of schools both near and far, and write more singular human interest stories rather than overarching articles with limited reach. I'd also love to do more of a podcast format with my interviewees, although this steps beyond the news magazine focus of the project.